Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look.
Josh, you didn't get permission. Hold on, let me do this for you. Calling Barranca. Permission to start the podcast, Barranca? Permission to start the podcast.
Permission granted. Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. On this end, my name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer. And are you out there, my co-host?
Just dropping off some mail over this harrowing pass in the Andes Mountains. I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and here it comes. Hello, Joshy. It's time for us to do a podcast.
Not bad, actually. Not bad. I was waiting for Jason's Cary Grant impression there because in this season on the films of 1939, we're here at Jason's pick, and it does star Cary Grant. Jason, what did you pick?
I picked Only Angels Have Wings by Howard Hawks, and like our 1953 season with The Wild One, it's a movie I had never seen before, but unlike the 1953 pick, this was a rousing success.
I'm glad, because that is a risk. I don't think I've ever done this. I've always found something that I've seen. So you never know how that will turn out, but I'm glad that whatever made you think this would be your kind of thing, that it turned out to be true.
I mean, I really only did it because, we have so many major movies in 1939, and it felt like it wouldn't be a full season without talking about Howard Hawks and Cary Grant. And and I know you wanted to see it also. So, I'm a giver. I give.
Well, again, it's great that it worked out for you, because it would have been hilarious if you picked this movie and I liked it and you didn't. So
that would have been fun too, Yeah. But honestly, I don't know if I could watch a Cary Grant movie and not like it, because he is the way I feel about like Paul Newman and Robert Duvall. Like, I just love watching this guy all the time.
He's so charismatic, and it's so easy to see how Jean Arthur's character could show up here in Barranca, the fictional South American town where Cary Grant is running this little podunk airmail service, and meet him and in like 5 minutes be completely in love with him because he's so charming.
It's like, as an actor, I'm like watching and I'm like, how does he do this? It seems so effortless. Like, they're all like almost like throwaways, but they all hit the right way. And he does that in every movie. Like, he's so good at that. Like, like, if you don't love me, I'm going to kill myself. Well, it was nice knowing you. And then it's just like moving on. Like, and it's just like, of course, like the more he rejects people, he's so cool that they just are drawn to him.
Right. Yeah. And you get it. I think it makes sense. So yeah, this is one of the movies, I think, like, it is now considered this kind of beloved classic, but at the time it wasn't necessarily as huge an acclaimed film. I mean, I feel like in nearly every episode we're talking about these movies and it's like, and this was nominated for 8 Oscars. And that wasn't quite the case here, but it was successful. It did gross $1 million at the box office. I don't know the budget. It's always hard to find figures for these movies from this time period. But according to some metrics, at least, it was the 3rd highest grossing film of 1939. So a big movie at the box office. It was nominated for 1 Oscar for Best Special Effects, which it did not win. And I don't know if we mentioned this in our Wizard of Oz episode, because that was also nominated for that award. But this was actually the first year for that category as a competitive category versus like an occasional special honorary award that was given out.
I feel like this should have gotten some award for the flying sequences, which I know is not an award, but like, it's 1939. We know that like Howard Hughes is doing kind of cool stuff with airplanes on film, but these flying sequences are amazing. Like, I don't know, can you give an award for best use of transportation? I mean, it's cinematography. It's kind of like practical effects, obviously. I don't know what you would give it for, but I think these sequences, they're so harrowing and tense, and like they really, you feel like you're in the Andes, not on the, Columbia studio lot or wherever they shot them, and probably somewhere in the mountains of Yorba Linda or somewhere in California. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think partly that might be the special effects award, because those shots are, put together with special effects from the different kinds of footage. But I mean, really what it would be is what we're talking about even now, which would be like an award for best stunts. That's what that is. And, even today, we're still waiting to see if the Oscars might add that kind of award. But the flying sequences are definitely amazing.
Yeah, so I think there should be stunt Oscars, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. And
yeah.
maybe we'll get there. It seems like every year for the past several years, it comes up and it's like there's all this support for it, but it just doesn't happen for whatever reason. So maybe we'll get there. But no retroactive Oscar for that for this film. This was also intended to play at the 1939 Cannes Film Festival, but as we discussed in our Mr. Smith Goes to Washington episode, that festival didn't actually occur, but it was one of the American films that was in the program for that festival. And critics, interestingly, again, because this is, I think, a really highly regarded film now, but critics were more just mildly positive about this one when it was first released. So Frank S. Nugent in the New York Times said, "The brew stirs slowly, as is the way with 2-hour shows, tending towards silly romanticism in its dialogue, but moving splendidly whenever the plot's wheels leave the ground and take off over the Andes. Few things, after all, are as exciting as a plane in flames, or the metallic voices of a pilot in a fog-shrouded plane and the chap in the radio room, or a screaming power dive, or the wild downward swoop of a plane taking off from a canyon's rim. Mr. Hawks has staged his flying sequences brilliantly. He has caught the drama in the meeting of a flyer and the brother of the man he killed. He has made proper use of the amiable performing talents of Cary Grant, Jean Arthur, Thomas Mitchell, Richard Barthelmess, Sig Ruman, and the rest. But when you add it all up, Only Angels Have Wings comes to an overly familiar total. It's a fairly good melodrama, nothing more."
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. I think look, if it's just cool flying, stuff, that almost brings us back to like ice volleys, right? Hey, we're on ice. But you have to invest in these characters and care about these characters. The actors make you do that. It's a very smart script. So I just think this one, gets the green light to fly wherever it wants, Josh.
Yeah, I think so too. I definitely feel like this movie does a good job of investing you in a lot of characters too. I mean, I think it's interesting the way this movie is structured because it starts out and you're sort of off kilter about like, who is this movie even about? None of the real main characters show up even in the first few minutes until we get to Jean Arthur. And then you think, oh, it's about Jean Arthur and Cary Grant and they're going to fall in love or whatever. And then, yeah, sort of, but also like she disappears for long stretches and it's about Thomas Mitchell's character, and it's about the other pilots, and it's about the dangers of flying, and it's about whether this business is going to keep going. And there's just so many different elements, but you really do care about a lot of it, I think, or even all of it.
Right. So it starts with these two pilots who are working the mail routes, and they meet Jean Arthur as she comes off the ship, and they like have a fun night in bars. And I want to take her to dinner. And then one of the pilots is, as we meet Cary Grant, who's the boss of the company, he's assigned to go and, deliver the mail, and he crashes. But had he just crashed without us knowing him, it would have been kind of like, this summer Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, where that whole first sequence is like, I don't even know, what are we calling that? The cube, the orb, what is
the entity?
AI?
I think that's what it's called.
Yeah. The entity just destroys all these people on the submarine, and you're like, cool, that was good effects, but you had no personal stake in their lives or anything like that. Whereas here you do. And, that guy's death also kind of really leads into Cary Grant and why his character is the way it is.
Right. And it also gives this motivation to Jean Arthur too, because, she's been in this place for just a few hours and already she feels like she's almost responsible for this guy, that he was reckless because he wanted to get back and have dinner with her or whatever. And so because we spent that time with them and got to know him a little bit and saw that he could have connected with her, we definitely care a lot more. And I think also one of the things is that like we as in the audience care and we think, oh, what a tragedy. This is so sad. And we're right there with Jean Arthur so that when the other pilots seem to be so callous and they're like, who was Joe or whatever? Even in the audience, we're like, what's wrong with them? And because there's an emotional investment in him.
I think I think I almost look at it as like a war movie, right? Like the other characters can care about this character, but they can't let it seep into their emotional lives, because if they do, they're going to put themselves in danger. So they have to say, this is, what the cost of the job is sometime. We all know the risks, and it's sad, but we got to keep going. And, that's why there are those scenes where every time a pilot dies, they go through whatever belongings he has left. And they're like, hey, if you want a keepsake, come and get it. And then they just move on. I think that makes sense.
Right. It makes sense to them because that's the only way they can kind of function. But I think for us in the audience, just like Jean Arthur, we're like, whoa, these people are messed up, because they probably are.
I remember when Jean Arthur said that in the movie. I was like, that's how I
it was
feel.
good dialogue. Really excellent writing. So the Age in Melbourne, Australia, in their unbylined,
a new one.
I kind of stretched to find some reviews for this one.
But this is our first Australian review.
So I think it might be, yes. So
you figured it would have been a Peter Weir movie, but you were wrong.
I don't think we've talked about a Peter Weir movie, have we?
Right. No, but he's Australian. So.
He sure is. Many other people are as well.
Yes.
Anyway, the
Paul
Age
Hogan
said, that's one.
Perilous aeroplane journeys in wild country in the vicinity of the Andes in South America form the basis of the film Only Angels Have Wings. Some of the scenes are remarkable examples of the producing art, and there is some excellent character acting. On the whole, however, the film does not reach the standard of aviation films such as Dawn Patrol, a weakness being in the story. Cary Grant plays with ease the role of Jeff Carter, a flyer with nerves of steel, who is in charge of the operations of the airlines. It is said that producers are gradually eliminating the embrace and kiss from films. If that be so, Cary Grant in this picture makes hay while the sun shines, even if it shines very fitfully.
What was the movie you mentioned there, Josh?
It's called Dawn Patrol. I think that's actually another Howard Hawks movie, although I haven't seen it.
And the one I have referenced in my vast research, Josh, is Flight from Glory, a 1937 B movie that really brought flying more to the forefront and showcased what you were able to do with airplanes in film.
Right. I mean, I think either way, like, these are not movies that are remembered nearly as well as Only Angels Have Wings are now. So, I mean, they didn't necessarily have the perspective per se to know what would stand the test of time and what wouldn't. But I mean, it's interesting to see. And this happens, I think, not infrequently in some of these older reviews where some movie that we know is this like major classic and reviewers are like, oh, it's not as good as this movie that people have completely forgotten about. So that's interesting. I'm not sure. I'm just looking at this now, which version, because there is the Dawn Patrol, which is a Howard Hawks film starring Richard Barthelmess from this film, actually, from 1930. But then it was also remade in 1938. So she may be referring, or whoever that is, may be referring to that one, which would have come out more recently. But either way, neither of these are movies that like a lot of people remember now, I don't think.
Dawn Patrol remade, much like Red Dawn has been remade since the original in the 80s, Josh.
Yeah.
Dawn.
Similar movies with words in the title.
Got to watch out for those communists who are invading America, right?
Yeah, you do. So finally, Marian Aitchison in the St. Petersburg Times in Florida. She was more enthused than the other reviewers. She said, superlative performances on the part of principal and supporting players alike, coupled with a timely melodramatic story, make Only Angels Have Wings one of the outstanding pictures of the year. Cary Grant is superb as the airman, and Jean Arthur will win your entire approval as the entertainer who strives so desperately to prove to him that she can face frantic worry without buckling under. To highlight this melodramatic romance, there are flying sequences that are as exciting as any that have been filmed. All in all, Only Angels Have Wings is a triumph for director Howard Hawks and his cast.
Well, that I mostly agree with. I mean, the characters are well drawn and well written, but the cast is great. Like, they're just great. And Hawks, is a legend for what he's able to do with actors. So I agree with all those things. And, we've already mentioned how cool the flying sequences are.
Yeah, the flying sequences are great. And I mean, she talks about the way that Jean Arthur's character kind of shows that desperation, like, she has to prove that she's worthy, I guess, of Cary Grant. And, some of that is the unfortunate sexual politics of this era. But I feel like it's more nuanced than a lot of the other movies from this time period might be. And it attempts to present a relationship that could be more equal than a lot of other relationships in movies from this era.
So I agree with you. I think Jean Arthur has one great movie star scene, but she does get kind of lost in like that damsel in distress who's not in distress, just in love type thing. But at the same time, yes, you're right. That is how this is often played between men and women. But I feel like not just Jean Arthur, not just women, but almost anyone who would come across Cary Grant. Like, I mean, the kid is basically in love with Cary Grant too. And the kid is the Thomas Mitchell character, not a child. So, he's just so captivating, charismatic. I think you could have made that anyone and they would have all been like Dutchie's loyal to him. They're all loyal to him in their own ways. He's just got that it factor to him.
Yeah, no, that is true. And definitely the kid, the Thomas Mitchell character. I mean, at one point, he even says, Jean Arthur says, well, you love him too. And he's like, yes, I do. And I mean, obviously it's meant to be, brotherly type love or whatever, but there's maybe a little hint of something more.
Yeah. Josh's favorite subtext of the
You
Austin
said it
movie.
First, man. You said it first.
I agree. I mean, honestly, you're stuck in a small port town in South America. Cary Grant, striking figure, comes along. Hey, man, let's deliver some mail to him.
Right. So, but you're right. He does have that charisma, and I mean, and he's very good looking. And this is, young Cary Grant here, with that dashing figure. So, absolutely, you're right. It's easy to see, like I was saying before, how Jean Arthur could fall in love with him immediately, and then Rita Hayworth shows up, and she was in love with him too. I mean, it's everyone really.
This is Rita Hayworth's first major role in film.
Yeah, and she certainly makes an impression as well. So, had you seen this before? Oh, obviously you hadn't seen this before.
I only knew it. Like I only was like, oh, Howard Hawks. I'll just pick this. So
right. Had you seen other Howard Hawks?
Yeah, and we've covered Hawks on the show before as well.
Right.
So no, we've talked about some of my favorite Hawks movies, haven't we? I watched Bringing Up Baby before this. His Girl Friday, I love. So yeah, this is he's an OG legend right here, Josh.
He is. Yeah, I've seen quite a few. And we talked about Howard Hawks when we did our episode that was my pick on Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which Jason did not care for.
No.
But I do love that film. And I've seen a number of Howard Hawks movies, but I did watch specifically before this 20th Century, which is a screwball comedy with John Barrymore and Carole Lombard, which I really didn't care for. And I feel like for whatever reason, some of those earlier Hawks, the screwball comedies, Bringing Up Baby that you just mentioned, I really am not a fan of. And even His Girl Friday, I was kind of like iffy on. I don't know. They just kind of grate on me, something about the rhythms of them or whatever. But I like a lot of other Hawks.
You should rewatch His Girl Friday. When's the last time you saw it?
It was a long time ago. It was definitely quite a while ago.
I think it's the perfect, it's Grant, it's Rosalind Russell. They're firing on all cylinders the way Hawks intends.
Right. And I mean, obviously that's a movie that everyone loves, but
everyone but Josh,
but me. I mean, I think I liked it more than those other two that I mentioned. But I mean, in terms of drama, I've really enjoyed other Howard Hawks movies. The most recent one before this and 20th Century I'd seen was To Have and Have Not with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, which is really, really good. So I've been a fan, but I had never seen this one. So as you said,
you're welcome.
Thank you. I enjoyed it and I'm glad you picked it. So, Dave, had you seen this before?
I had not. No, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes was the first one for me back then when we covered that, and glad to have watched this one too.
All right. Continue to expand Dave's horizons here.
Damn right.
Awesome movie here.
All of our horizons with this one, Josh.
True.
This is an awesome movie or home run.
It is. Mm-hmm. So anything else you want to say about the background of this film?
Yeah, I mean, this is, in a way, it's almost, I'm not going to say it's based on a true story, but Hawks knew pilots who had been through this where, one had to eject because the plane was going down and the other person who was left in the plane died. So that was a big deal. It was originally called Plane Number 4 and Plane from Barranca. Plane Number 4 was a story written by Ann Wigton, and then Hawks wrote Plane from Barranca. And of course, we've mentioned William Rankin, I believe, and Eleanor Griffin, that who had uncredited writings on this, and Jules Furthman, who did get the credit for it, was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay for Mutiny on the Bounty.
All right. Yeah. Always interesting about how these stories come about. And I think they combined those two stories, and then they were also, rewriting during production. And this went over by like 31 days or something during principal photography. So impressive that it still came together so wonderfully.
It was the third highest grossing film of 1939.
Yeah. So we'll come back then and talk more of our general thoughts on Only Angels Have Wings. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1939, we are talking about Jason's pick, Only Angels Have Wings. And Jason, since you hadn't seen this and you picked it, like, what did you anticipate, and did it kind of live up to your specific expectations for it?
It exceeded all of those. So I mean, I tried to know as little as possible about it. Sometimes it's fun to do that, right? And I couldn't help but thinking, I'm wondering if you guys did too. It very much felt like Wages of Fear, which we covered in our 53 season, right? This is so much so to the point where one of the missions is bombing mountains with nitroglycerin, right? Or something like that, which was a big plot point in the Wages of Fear, how they were transporting that. And this was like a town at the end of the world where people are just trying to get by. So it definitely felt like this was a huge influence on that. Yeah, like I said, like I'm on a Cary Grant kick right now, since we started this. I watched Charade the other day. I'm in the middle of Notorious now. I watched Bringing Up Baby. Like I'll watch anything that guy does. But I just feel like, we're talking about a bunch of legends who are all hitting on big cylinders here. So Josh, before I go further, what do you feel about that?
Well, first of all, I 100% agree with you. I definitely thought of the Wages of Fear as I was watching this, and they're transporting. I mean, what happens is eventually they'd have to dump the nitroglycerin on the mountain because they can't get the plane to where they're supposed to go. But the plan is they're supposed to transport it just like in the Wages of Fear,
right?
Except they have to, fly to this mine or whatever instead of driving. But yeah, I totally thought of it because of that scene, but also, as you were saying, this town that's sort of in the middle of nowhere where people come because they have nowhere else to go. These pilots are not exactly, they're not getting hired by major airlines or whatever. Cary Grant is the only one who's going to give them a job. And of course, especially the Richard Barthelmess character who comes in, who's this pariah, even among the pilots in Barranca, but he manages to get hired if he'll do the most dangerous missions. So I'm sure that was an influence on the Wages of Fear. And I definitely appreciated that about it.
So you mentioned the McPherson character. That's this is one of the things that was so good about it, right? So this Bat McPherson character has this reputation. No one will hire him because he ejected from a plane that he was piloting, and his mechanic, who's the kid's older brother, was trapped in the plane and died. So no one trusts this guy anymore. Meanwhile, his wife is Cary Grant's ex, right? That's the Rita Hayworth character who, he says he's glad that they broke up, but at the same time, it has lasting effects on him. You could tell that. And then the kid is Cary Grant's right-hand man and like the most loyal pilot that he has. And he's ailing with his own physical maladies. He's losing his eyesight, so he won't be around for much longer. So you have all these combustible elements. They did a great job of kind of building conflicts before actually showcasing the conflicts.
Yeah, I mean, and like I was saying before, I think that's what's impressive here is that you think this is about one thing, and it is, but it's also about so many other things, and they really weave that together so effectively. And right, whether it's the kid or it's Rita Hayworth, it's Jean Arthur, it's, and the other pilots who resent McPherson because, as you said, he can't be trusted. And I mean, all the different dynamics here. And I do love the dynamic. One of the things that I think was really amusing is we don't know why the kid is called the kid, right? That's just his nickname and everyone calls him that. But also he and I think other people, they all call Cary Grant, presumably because he's the boss.
Papa.
They call him like Papa.
Yeah.
And so I love that Thomas Mitchell is obviously, significantly older than Cary Grant, but here he is being called the kid and he's calling Cary Grant Papa. And I think that shows that this sort of inverted dynamic of like the authority figure versus the sort of almost child figure or whatever. And I liked the way that was presented.
Right. And the kid has so many skills. I was a little disappointed that he didn't say, because of Stranger Things. It would have been fun if he had said, "Goodbye, Papa," like 11 does. But anyway, that's a deep cut there. But yes, look, let's talk about Thomas Mitchell, who has, as we have anointed Rob Reiner as jokingly the awesome movie year director, Thomas Mitchell has to be our first awesome movie year actor in the Hall of Fame just for 1939 alone, right? This is our fourth or third of the five that we're covering with him, right?
Yeah, this is the third. We talked about him in Stagecoach, which was the role he won an Oscar for, and in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington before this.
Right, and we're going to get to him in some movie that probably no one's heard of called Gone with the Wind, right? So
yeah.
So he did those four in Hunchback of Notre Dame and all in 39. As I was telling you the other day, he seems like the most in-demand character actor of the time, right? The way that like Philip Seymour Hoffman or John C. Reilly, Steve Buscemi, any of these guys, that we love as character actors, it just seems like he was this guy and he delivers every single time.
Right. I mean, he does bring so much. I mean, he won that Oscar for Stagecoach, but he's really good in all of these roles, and they're all supporting roles and all characters who are maybe at times a little ridiculous, but he brings such depth and such pathos to them. And the same thing goes here for the kid, that we really feel, I mean, there's maybe more tragedy to this character than there is to those other two characters that we've seen him play thus far. But still, I mean, we really feel that emotion and we really identify with him and root for him or whatever along his arc in this film.
So this would have been, out of the three that I watched, this is the most from this year. This is the one that I think is the best performance. And that doesn't mean the other two aren't great. I just think, like you said, there's maybe a little more going on with this character. And he really does showcase those emotions and that kind of pain and that longing and that almost his worth is almost kind of based on what he's able to do as a pilot, right? So I think this is the best showcase for him.
Yeah, I mean, again, he won that Oscar for Stagecoach. That role has more broad comedy moments in it before we get to the pathos of it. Maybe that showed more range or something, but I agree with you. I think there's the most depth in this role of the three that we've seen him in thus far this season. And I think what you're saying about how his worth is tied to being able to be a pilot, I think that's true for all of these characters. I mean, he's the one who's older, and like you said, his eyesight is failing and he's going to be grounded. But I feel like any of these characters, Cary Grant or even, the minor pilot characters or McPherson, right, who has become ostracized and a pariah, and yet he's still he has to get a job as a pilot because he needs to get back up there. All of them basically tie their self-worth to the ability to fly planes.
I think so. I mean, with the kid, he talks about how he started flying. I think it was like 1917, right? That's what he
says 22 years ago. So yeah, that would be.
Right. And he's like, yeah, you can't complain about that. Who would have thought I would have had 22 years doing this, right? So he's still finding, and he goes on a mission that he shouldn't go on at the end. And he's still, he's a lifer in this business. And you could see that. The Barthelmess, how do you pronounce his last name?
Yeah, I
Josh?
think it's Barthelmess. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
So I didn't really know who Richard Barthelmess was before this movie, but I guess, what I learned is he was a huge silent film star, and Hawks was one of the directors who kind of kept working with him when Talkies started, but he had a plastic surgery that went wrong that left all these scars. Or a scar on his face. And whenever he would work after that, he would use makeup to cover it up. But Hawks said the character should have that scar shown. And that's the reason that they went with his real physical appearance, which, clearly adds to that backstory of that crash and him escaping with his life.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of his silent films. He's one of those silent film stars who didn't really have a successful transition to talkies. He was in some films. And like you said, Hawks, I think, kind of fought for getting him in this movie, wanted to work with him. But I saw him in a Bette Davis movie called The Cabin in the Cotton, where he's really not good. And is one of those movies where sometimes you can tell, like, actors who are big in silent films can't transition to a different style of acting in talkies. And I think that might have been the case in that film. But here he fits in well, I think. And maybe because in part this character is kind of reserved and stoic, and he doesn't, he's able to underplay, which is the opposite of what a lot of silent film performers would do.
Yeah, there's a whole weight to what his past has, played into his present. Like you feel that kind of, whether it's guilt or kind of like you're saying, the banishment of him and how that's played into his psyche. He's got a beautiful wife that he's like, I don't even know if I could provide for her. And so when Grant says, I'll hire you, but you're going to take all the most dangerous missions, like, it's almost like, yeah, well, I should be doing that. I have to prove myself again.
Right. I mean, he's being punished, but he's also punishing himself as much as anyone else is punishing him. Because, I mean, he clearly feels guilt and remorse for what he did.
I think so. Josh, we'll talk about the ladies. We talked about Jean Arthur and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And I almost felt like that character offered more here. There was this one great movie star scene here. Everything else was like, oh, I'm meeting the boys. I'm in love with this man. I'm here. I'm supportive. But she's this piano player. And obviously this is a small end of the world town. There's no entertainment. They have this bar that Dutchie owns, who also owns the mail company here. And, there's always nightly entertainment and people playing guitar and singing. And she gets on the piano and she has a real movie star turn there with that song. I thought that was like her showcase scene in this thing.
Yeah, and that's a great moment too, because it starts out with Cary Grant sitting at the piano. And as we've said, he's Cary Grant. He's so charming. He can do anything. And he's kind of trying to pluck out this song and he's not doing it well. And she keeps interrupting him like, no, do it like this, do it like this. And he seems to be like, okay, lady, okay, woman, sure, you know how to do stuff. And then she finally shoves him aside and she's like this great piano player. And I think it's sort of a little moment to show him up too. Like, hey, dude, you don't know everything. Like, I actually really know what I'm doing here.
Well, I think that's a recurring theme in Grant movies, right? Where he thinks he always knows best and ends up as the butt of the joke. And he just is able to sell all those things so perfectly. So that to me is my favorite scene with her. As far as Rita Hayworth, she's smoldering. She's beautiful. This performance, I think, is up and down. There's the scene where she's drunk or she's crying. And I don't think anyone would say that this is the best Rita Hayworth performance.
Right. I mean, it's a smaller role, but yeah, I feel like there were a couple moments where she was maybe overdoing it a little, maybe feeling like here's my moment to shine or something like that. But you can see how she became this huge sex symbol or whatever. I mean, she definitely pops on the screen as soon as she shows up. And, you can also see how these men both were smitten with her or whatever. Whereas not that Jean Arthur isn't beautiful or charismatic, but she has more of that like flinty kind of tough girl style to her. And, maybe it takes Cary Grant a little while to realize that he's in love with her just as she's in love with him.
I have a question for you, Josh. This is, I'm watching the movie. There's this pilot Gent, right? And with that nitroglycerin run, he says, whoa, there's nothing in my contract about doing this. I don't have to do this. I'm not going to do this. It's too dangerous. And Cary Grant and everyone's like, no, that makes sense. You don't have to do it. But then Cary Grant fires him. And I don't think he could fire him for that.
Pretty sure there are no labor laws in Barranca.
Calling Barranca. Please get a copy of the Laborer's Handbook, Barranca.
I mean, I think that's why they set up these airlines in places like that and not in, New York City or whatever. Because also, safety regulations don't seem to be a thing there in Barranca.
Oh yeah, the more dangerous, the more enthused the pilots are to go up in the weather.
Right. I mean, I love too in the opening of the film, right? After the pilot that Jean Arthur first meets, after he dies, and The weather is bad, right? They can't fly again, and he's just died. And so they're all in the bar and they're drinking and they're drinking and they're drinking. And then finally the weather clears and Cary Grant has had so much to drink. And he's like, give me some coffee. I'm going up. And he's like drunk flying the plane. And this is the hero of the film.
That's the 1930s, Josh. Come on.
Right. It's the 1930s. Although I would imagine that, I mean, I guess I would hope that even in 1939, maybe in America, pilots were not allowed to fly drunk.
Well, as you said, this is Barranca.
Right.
The land of no laws.
In that scene, I for a moment there, I thought that he said to load coffee into the plane like fuel, like he was confused, you know.
Instead, it was just you who was confused, Dave.
Yeah, of course.
But right, all it takes is he drinks a cup of coffee and he's good to go. And obviously that's true. I mean, right? He flies it with no problem. That's because he's Cary Grant. It's no big deal. He can fly drunk. It's all good.
Yeah. So I just three other things I wanted to touch on, Josh.
Yeah.
One, we're kind of almost talking about it. The mix of like dramatic plot, but there's some really funny moments in here. And these, it's Hawks, it's Grant, it's Arthur. Like these are really expert comic actors. And I think that mix, which doesn't always work, and especially, this is the 30s, it's not really like, action comedies were a big thing back then, right? Like it really, really works in this film.
Yeah, I think so. And we get some almost screwball-y moments with like the farcical slamming doors kind of thing as Jean Arthur is taking a bath in Cary Grant's room and he comes in and there she is in the bathroom and he suddenly comes across her. And then when she comes out, then Rita Hayworth comes in and she leaves. And then Thomas Mitchell shows up and it's this sort of like, revolving door thing that's very screwball comedy in that scene.
Yeah, I think, and it works. It works really well here. And I also wanted to say, kind of almost going back to that Wages of Fear talk, one of the items that makes both of these so successful is you actually feel like you're in that town. And, we know this was shot in Southern California, but you feel like this is a skeezy, like kind of lawless port town. Here it's in South America, but it could have been in anywhere, like this end of the world town. I think they did a great job with the environment.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, I mean, stuff like this, it's not like it was shot on location. It's generally just on sound stages or whatever, but it does feel very real and it feels very lived in. And I appreciated that, something basic that they wouldn't have necessarily done in 30s movies, that like the local characters, they speak Spanish. And they don't suddenly just start speaking English or whatever. And Cary Grant keeps having to say, like, what is he talking about? Because Cary Grant doesn't speak Spanish. And so all of that added up to, even though this is a fictional town in an unnamed country, like it does feel like a believable place where all of these people could end up.
Right. You had mentioned that they're, hey, the weather cleared, we got to fly the mail. They have a great plot device, a ticking clock, where if they deliver the mail every day for 6 months, they get like a huge government contract and they save Dutchie's business, right? So the fact that that's on the line on all these flights makes it so you can't just be like, well, we're not going to fly because it's raining out, right? So I think they did a really good job of motivating the actions in this film.
Right. I think so too. Although on the other hand, sometimes as they're taking these insane risks and all getting injured and dying, I'm like, for the mail? For the fucking mail? So somebody can write a letter to their grandma? Come on. But, that was what it was then, I guess.
Right. And I don't think it's for the mail. I think it's because, they're going to make a ton of money and that, money trumps all, Josh.
Well, I think, yeah, true. But I think it's even more than that. It's what we were saying before, which is that these people are addicted to this risk and they're addicted to the rush of flying. And it could be the mail. It could be anything. It almost doesn't even matter.
They feel the need for speed.
Well, I mean, we talk about the Wages of Fear, but obviously Top Gun, this has got to be a massive influence on that.
I think you're right. I mean, honestly, the flying sequences are so incredible. It's probably any movie that utilizes airplanes in this type of way has probably looked at this film and been like, yeah, this is a good blueprint for us.
Right. Right. Oh, absolutely. Dave, did you have any particular things that you enjoyed about this?
I mean, wasn't as taken with like the romance angle of it all. Like I particularly liked the action, the flying scenes, all that stuff. The setting Jason was talking about, I thought was like really well done, where you felt like you were in that town. There's a lot of things to like about it though, and overall, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I can understand what you're saying about the romance. I mean, I bought it, but I wasn't necessarily super swept up in it. But to me, it was like, well, that's not really the issue per se, because there's so much else going on. And for the amount of time they spend on the romance, I was cool. So,
I'm with Dave on that. I think that's also something of the time period where, people meet and after 5 minutes, I mean, and, whether that's from the film or because of the fact that like, it's just societal differences, right? From how we live now. People were always falling in love and planning marriages within like the first 10 minutes of movies, it felt like.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely true. And I think that was one thing that I was saying is that like, sometimes that's really tough to buy into in a movie from this era. But when you have someone with the charisma of Cary Grant, and I think the chemistry that he and Jean Arthur have, you can buy into it more easily. That they really did fall in love, or that she fell in love. Maybe it takes a little longer for him to fully fall in love, but that really did happen within that short period of time. So I bought it. Should we rate this out of 5 horrific plane crashes?
I was going to just say 5 mail planes, which was a much nicer way to go, but
that's fine.
I gave it 4 mail planes. It delivered the mail and on time for me. It holds up, buddy.
Yeah, I'm going to give it 3.5 crashes. So maybe 1 survivor there at the end. But
is it Bat McPherson?
Nah, screw him. It's the kid. We got to let the kid live, right? We really wanted him to survive. We wanted him to pull through.
We did, but not so much. It didn't happen.
Yeah. But no, I enjoyed this film. I'm glad that I got to see it. I did want to see it. And I think it's really an entertaining film. If you like Cary Grant, if you like Howard Hawks, or just want to see amazing stunts that still look amazing, it's absolutely worth checking out. So Dave, how would you rate it?
We found the other half of Josh's plane because I also gave it 3.5.
So the kids died after all. We'll come back and talk about the legacy of Only Angels Have Wings. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1939, we have been talking about Jason's pick, Only Angels Have Wings. And as we said, we have talked about Howard Hawks before. We did an episode on Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and what an amazing career this guy had. I mean, it's insane how much he did over the course of nearly 50 years as a director.
I mean, I just keep looking at these guys from, we just mentioned Thomas Mitchell's 39, but, Grant and Hawks worked together 5 times. Let's look at 1938, 39, and 40. Bringing Up Baby, Only Angels Have Wings, and His Girl Friday. Like, come on, dude. What is happening here?
Right. I mean, and Howard Hawks was so good at so many different genres. I mean, as much as I was sort of critical of those screwball comedies, I mean, those are some of the most famous comedies of all time. He's also hugely known for Westerns like Rio Bravo and Red River and El Dorado. He directed the original Scarface. I mentioned To Have and Have Not, which was great. But I mean, that, which is so good, is not even the most famous movie he made with Bogart and Bacall, because he also directed The Big Sleep. And, was working all the way until 1970 when he made his final film, which was another Western called Rio Lobo, which I haven't seen, but I think is sort of an unofficial remake of Rio Bravo.
I mean, he's worked with pretty much every big star that you could want to work with. He was only nominated for Best Director for Sergeant York, Josh. Of all these movies, 1 nomination? Come on.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I haven't seen Sergeant York. I've seen a bunch of those other ones, but you mentioned His Girl Friday, how much you love that. Is there any other Hawks movie that you saw or that is a favorite?
I'm sticking with His Girl Friday for now, Josh.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
But we gotta, we might have mentioned this on Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, who, not the Marilyn Monroe character, but the other lead was kind of that Hawksian woman. And, you really get that, I think, in His Girl Friday, that fast talking, laser wit, the woman who can hold her own against anybody, which at this time was a different thing. And, I know with this one that he wanted Jean Arthur to kind of encapsulate that, and she just never kind of went with it. And then you had mentioned Collins, Have and Have Not. And what I had read was after Jean Arthur had seen that movie, she like drove to Howard Hawks's house and he didn't know he was there. And she said that she saw the movie and then she said, I wish I'd done what you'd asked me to do. If you ever make another picture with me, I promise I'll do any goddamn thing you want me to. If a kid, Lauren Bacall, can come in and do that kind of stuff, I could certainly do it. But they never worked together again.
Yeah.
But Hawk said he enjoyed her, but working with her, but didn't feel like he was able to help her as he was able to help other actors that he worked with. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I understand. Bacall is fantastic into Have and Have Not, of course, but I think she does get across a lot of that. I think that's one of the things, like I was talking about earlier, that you get the sense that this can be an equal relationship between her and Cary Grant's character because she has that Hawksian kind of grit or whatever, and maybe not in the same way as Rosalind Russell in His Girl Friday, but this is not a screwball comedy, so you don't want it to be played the same way exactly. So I don't know. I think he maybe brought more of that out of her than they realized.
yeah, that's possible. Should we talk about Cary Grant?
You're still not quite there, although I will say it's better than your Jimmy Stewart.
Now, why would you say a thing like that?
Yeah, I mean, Cary Grant, really, like him and Jimmy Stewart, I feel like these are the iconic movie stars of classic Hollywood, male movie stars of classic Hollywood. As you said, he worked with Hawks a bunch of times. I mean, he worked with so many of the great directors. He's also known for his work with Alfred Hitchcock in Notorious, as you mentioned, North by Northwest, To Catch a Thief, Suspicion, all great movies. He was great in screwball comedies, like with Hawks. Also, we talked about Leo McCarey when we did our episode on Love Affair, and they made a bunch of movies together, including The Awful Truth, which is a fun screwball comedy, and the remake of Love Affair, An Affair to Remember. He worked all the way into the 60s. His final film, Walk, Don't Run, in 1966. And then he retired to raise his daughter, which is such a nice thing.
Yeah, he was a successful businessman after that. But it's tough to place this guy because he's so singular. Like there's no one really like him, right? He delivers everything and you believe everything that he's doing, but he's just so adept at like comedy without trying or seemingly without trying. I just love that about him. He's just, everything he does is the right choice, it feels like to me.
Yeah, and I think that comedy is a way, especially being self-deprecating, or like you were saying, where he has often these moments where his character is kind of overconfident and then gets shown up or whatever. And in a way that sort of makes you more inclined to like him, where you might be like, oh, who is this pretty boy or whatever? He's so good looking and he's so suave. And I kind of am suspicious of that or whatever, but he's also so able to laugh at himself that he gets you on his side. And you're right, he's very singular. I feel like George Clooney gets compared to him a lot, and he has some of that similar quality where he's so good looking and so suave, but yet he's really good at making a fool of himself in an endearing way.
Well, he doesn't talk like this though, Josh. So that's the point. So
no, he doesn't. That's true.
Do you have a favorite of his work with Hitchcock? I rewatched North by Northwest this week, and it was just a delight to rewatch that.
Yeah, I've seen all those movies, but not in a long time. I do love North by Northwest. Although I feel like I'm sure he's great, but I feel like that's more about like the big set pieces that Hitchcock constructs. I remember liking To Catch a Thief a lot, which is very much about like, the kind of sexiness and the chemistry with him and Grace Kelly. So that may be more similar to what he's got going on here with Jean Arthur or what he does in those screwball comedies. But it's been a really long time since I've seen any of those Hitchcock movies.
So yeah, those set pieces in North by Northwest are legendary, iconic, but what makes those tick so well is the first act is set up so brilliantly, and it's all really him getting into this position that he shouldn't be in. And that's why the whole motor of that movie works. So I think you should rewatch it, give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't like it. I mean, I did like it a lot, but I think that's what sticks in my mind more than his performance. But maybe if I watched it again, the performance would stick out to me more. Like Hawks, he was nominated for Oscars. He didn't win a competitive Oscar at all. He got an honorary Oscar in 1970. And recently, I haven't seen this, but there was a miniseries, a biopic miniseries about his life called Archie, which was his given name. starring Jason Isaacs. And I'm not sure. I'd be curious to see, like, it's got to be tough to play Cary Grant because that voice, right? It's so iconic, but it's also been done so much and parodied so much that I feel like if you did it too accurately, it would almost come off like a parody.
So you're saying mine is really top notch because I don't really sound like him. I'm just doing kind of a thing here, Josh. Now I got into Katharine Hepburn territory.
Yeah, or maybe a little bit of Terrence and Phillip from South Park.
Hello, Jesse. Judy. You know, the thing is, he was born in England and he came over here and at a young age. And I think that kind of regal yet non-English accent, I don't know. I don't know. There's just no one like him.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing a bit of what they call the mid-Atlantic accent, which is the fake accent that was made up for movies that a lot of actors do. But it's definitely his own distinctive version. You're right. No one sounds like Cary Grant unless they're trying to do a Cary Grant impression.
It's interesting because I feel like, again, there are all these scenes where like he's able to like kind of take the backseat in the scene, but he's still like the driver of the scene because people will be like, I'm really upset. And he'll be like, you are? And it'll be like, yeah, you don't know what happened to me. Well, tell me what happened to you. And it's just like a lot of that kind of repetitive patter that he's able to kind of push along. So I don't know, man. I just think the actors really hit this one hard.
Yeah, I agree. You briefly did that Judy or whatever, which I was waiting for because that's a weirdly like famous Cary Grant thing, but it's one of those things. And I was reading this somewhere that like, because I literally Googled Judy because I was like, well, he didn't say it in this.
Judy.
He didn't say it in this film, right? Rita Hayworth's character is named Judy, and he talks to her like he says her name a lot, but he never says it specifically in that way. And it's one of those things like Play It Again, Sam, where he never actually said it. It was just from people's impressions of him. And then it became known as a thing that he would say, and people in public would bug him to like say the line. But it wasn't ever a line that he actually said in any movie.
Well, isn't that, what is it? The Luke, I am your father, or what's the one in Star Wars that's like
that? Yeah. He says it's just the like construction of how it is. Like Play It Again, Sam. He never says that, but he does say play it again.
Right.
You know, or beam me up, Scotty is something that they never actually said on Star Trek, things like that. Right. But, you know, he spent his whole life having people hound him about saying that.
Josh, shout out to our boy, Sig Ruman, who played Dutchie, a comic foil for many Marx Brothers films, A Night at the Opera, A Day at the Races, and A Night in Casablanca. And, he worked with Ernst Lubitsch a lot. He was in Nitschke the same year. And he also worked with Billy Wilder a good amount.
Yeah, some amazing filmmakers. And Ninotchka is great. I think that's one we're not getting to, but it is a very enjoyable film that I rewatched recently. Really entertaining romantic comedy. Rita Hayworth, this was a breakthrough. As we said, she'd been in movies before, but this was really the role that got her noticed. She became this major pinup girl during World War II. All the pilots
the number one pinup girl in World War II.
And I don't know how they quantified that, but they
probably the most posters sold or something like that. Yeah,
right. And they would put her photo up in their planes and things like that. She's known for playing femme fatale. Her most famous role in Gilda with Glenn Ford. She was also a big role in Lady from Shanghai, which is an Orson Welles film. And I think of the sort of her status as a pinup because, we did our episode on the Shawshank Redemption and the poster of Rita Hayworth is the first one that Andy Dufresne uses to cover up his hole that he's making in his cell. And the original title of that, the Stephen King story, is actually Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption is the title of it.
That's true. She made 2 films with Fred Astaire, You'll Never Get Rich and You Were Never Lovelier. And Astaire once said she was his favorite dance partner. Take that, Ginger Rogers.
Right. I was going to say, I haven't seen those films, but that's really kind of an insult to both Ginger Rogers and Sid Charisse, who is an amazing dancer and made good movies with Fred Astaire as well.
Maybe he was just kind of, it was the publicity for one of those movies and he had to kind of build it up. Who knows? So
right. That is possible.
Hey, Josh, here's a fun fact for you. I love fun facts, Josh.
You do.
Calling Barranca became a recurring line in Looney Tunes cartoons.
I feel like I should know that because I'm sure I watched Looney Tunes cartoons as a kid and heard that and didn't know what the hell it was.
I bet if we looked at, just YouTube search calling Baranka Looney Tunes, you would remember it. Like you would see like, oh yeah, I remember that. So.
Right. I feel like those old Looney Tunes cartoons are full of so many like pop culture references to stuff from the 30s and 40s that kids in the 80s were watching and didn't have any idea what it was and just rolled with it.
Hey, I'm with it. I love Looney Tunes, bro. I was always a Looney Tunes guy over like a Disney guy.
Yeah, I think I was mainly just because it was like on Nickelodeon in the afternoons or something like that. And I would watch those cartoons when I came home from school.
It would have been weird if one of the planes got lost in the air and the pilot said, I knew I shouldn't have made that left turn at Albuquerque.
Yeah, because they're nowhere near Albuquerque either.
Exactly. So.
Anything else you want to mention about the legacy of this film, Jason?
No, I mean, it's there. You got to go watch it, dude.
Yeah, I agree. I think enthusiastic recommendations from all of us on this film. So that is Only Angels Have Wings, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can fly on over to our social media and online presence.
AwesomeMovieYear.com on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Abortion. And of course, you can letterbox us with the hashtag Awesome Movie Year. I'm Go for Jason on Letterboxd, Jason Harris Comedy or J Harris Comedy on all the socials.
You can find some old stuff from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Jason now has called this abortion 2 episodes in a row. I really hope this doesn't become a thing. I'm at Signal Bleed on Twitter or X, as well as on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
Jason, what do we have in our next episode?
Josh, we are covering now get this, Josh, it was a book and then they made it into a movie and it's called Wuthering Heights.
It is one of our award winners. We kind of stretched a bit to find a different one. We usually do a film festival there, but it is actually the New York Film Critics Circle award winner because that was the best option for us. So tune in next time for Wuthering Heights, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.